Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasia. In this week's episode, we're going to delve into the events from AEW, building towards their Grand Slam special next week in New York, which will be headlined by Samoa Joe versus MJF for the AEW World Championship. We will also look into the weekly television shows from WWE, as well as give our thoughts on the shock return of Nia Jax. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. We're going to start off with AEW's programming for this week, but if you would like to hear our thoughts first on what happened in WWE, please feel free to jump ahead using the time chapters in the description of the video. On that note, Thanasia, take us away with what happened on Collision.
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be around. Thanks for having me on the show. We had an interesting opening to the show on Collision because Jon Moxley is in the house and he's defending the international title in his home state of Ohio against Action Andretti. I like seeing Mox, opening the show with an international title. It's kind of like a pseudo TV title now, especially the way that Orange Cassidy was opening Dynamite with it, and now Mox is doing the same. In the beginning of the match, Moxley's leg becomes injured, and Action Andretti targets it with some stiff kicks. He's smacking it on the ring apron, and he locks in a half crab. Moxley responds uncharacteristically with a tope suicida. He also hits a cutter out of nowhere from the attempted springboard attack, but he can't hold Action down for the sleeper and eats a falcon arrow. Andretti then lands on his feet to counter the avalanche German suplex and hits a springboard corkscrew lateral press to boot. Andretti delivers a signature stomp a signature smack with the stomps to the fallen foe, but this actually wakes up Moxley, who ends up locking in the bulldog choke for the win. Next up, another TBS title match in this instance, Chris Statlander versus Robin Renegade, so two titles to open up the show. Statlander reverses the monkey flip, dodges the enziguri, and hits a deadlift German. Robin puts a straitjacket hold on, but Statlander retakes control and hits Blue Thunder. Renegade hits a winning edge half Nelson facebuster, reminiscent, of course, of Adam Copeland's repertoire. And then in the finish, Statlander hits a facebuster off the electric chair, knocks her sister Charlotte off, and rolls up Renegade to retain. This prompts a dirty heel attack. And who should make the save but Jade Cargill? Jade Cargill is back, the former TBS champion. She hits a chokeslam to Robin. Looks like she's going to be a baby face. Yeah, no. Glam slam to Chris Statlander. She's after the strap, her strap. Next, we had an interesting segment with Schiavone, who sits down with both Eddie Kingston and Claudio. Eddie is resentful of Claudio's abandonment going to the land of make-believe, of course, referring to WWE. They actually live together, and Claudio even met Eddie's parents. And they're going to face off at Grand Slam with Eddie's parents in New York for a title versus title. The NJPW Strong Openweight title is being put on the line, as is the Ring of Honor World Championship. Next up on the card, BC Gold are in trios action against Gravity, Aerostar, and Dios del Intramundo. Colton gets a flipping bulldog on Gravity. Austin hits a big vertical suplex on the same opponent as Juice adds on a senton. We see a hot tag for the babyfaces to use the ropes for drop kicks and a roll-through cutter. But Austin actually develops a full Nelson slam, and the Guns hit their patented flapjack and reverse STO combo. Juice smacks a leg lariat, his DDT, hooks the leg for 3 as Andrade mysteriously watches from backstage. Brief package of CJ Perry, who was cast aside by Miro when he lost the TNT title, apparently. And now she's feeling torn, but she wants to become, once again, the best manager in wrestling. Rey Fenix returns to take on Angelico, who is accompanied by Serpentico. Rey Fenix gets a springboard arm drag and a frog splash in as Angelico turns the leg sweep into a roll-through cover, but Phoenix hits the roll-through cutter himself and the power slam pile driver for the 3 count. Next up, this is the big start of one of my highlights of the night, one of my three highlights of the night, and it's the semi-final, Roddy taking on Darby Allin. In this match, Luchasaurus, he brutalizes Darby with a lawn dart and he hits him into the roller door backstage. And then in the ring, the Messiah of the Backbreaker goes straight to town, and he even hits a gut buster for full upper body attack. He hits the more backbreakers and uses the ropes for leverage to continue the attack in the corner. Strong drives the spine of Allin into the ring post and into the barricade. Darby, however, attacks Roddy's neck, the injured neck, with a guillotine. He looks for quick pins to finish very quickly, which plays into the fact that he's feeling definitely not his best self after that Luchasaurus attack. He even gets a code red in there. But Roddy expertly applies the FTF and a huge backbreaker and heads to the top turnbuckle, but Darby rolls out of the ring. Strong wants to end it with a Boston Crab, again heading for that back attack. Darby hits Stundog Millionaire on the apron and a coffin drop to the outside, a DDT in the ring, but they all weaken his back. So in the end, Roddy does get the knee up for the coffin drop the second time and hits his suplex lift backbreaker to end the party and qualify into the final of the Grand Slam tournament. Dimitri, did you have any thoughts on that highlight?
I think it was a solid match. And it's good to see these competitors get some match time into their legs, particularly guys like Roderick Strong, who hasn't been featured as much, mainly due to his injury. I don't know how I feel about guys like Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy, who seemingly take on injury damage every week, and yet just keep coming back. And in this case, he had a pre-match assault and it's coming back. I can get into this a little bit more with Dynamite as well, just to sort of etch in what I mean when I say this repeated nature of it. But the match itself I found very solid, and I think in this case it actually makes sense. It made sense that they wounded Darby even further so that Roderick Strong, who has an injured neck, it feels way more level. Because as we know, the presentation of late has been of Darby as one of the really solid stars just below the main card. And Roderick Strong, just by virtue of injury and not being there that long, hasn't had that chance to move up. So I appreciated that it kind of felt like they're bringing them down to a similar level so that whatever result happens, it kind of makes sense.
Let me move on to highlight number 2. This one's a bit briefer, but it has got a big line in here. It's the Bryan Danielson promo. So he says that his time in the ring is running out. He promised Birdie that he would start wrapping up his career when she turned 7. And, well, she's 6 years old now. And he says that he's like Odysseus coming home after the Trojan War. He's fighting the Cyclops. He's fighting the Sirens. And it's going to be the most epic year for him. And the next big match is at Wrestle Dream. He's going to take on Zack Sabre Jr. We're all in for a treat on this one. Ricky Starks, of course, interrupts. He says that he has immortalized himself as the face of Collision. And when he came to after being knocked out at when the two took each other on, he said that he just wants to take now. He's greedy. He's not just hungry. And in this match, Danielson is actually in this segment, Danielson was actually about to offer a spot in the BCC, or at least it appeared so. But Ricky and Big Bill, of course, actually decide to pound on him instead. Mox comes out to make the save and ends up getting pounded on too. Starks and Big Bill leave the veterans beaten in a pulp in the ring. Did you have any thoughts, or shall I go on to our main event of the evening?
Just a few quick thoughts. Firstly, I like that he referenced Odysseus, as someone who is well versed in Greek mythology. And for those who will remember, Odysseus actually took a very long time to get back home from the Trojan War. So let's hope this 1-year retirement actually turns into a 20-year saga for the American Dragon. No, but all kidding aside, I thought it was very heartfelt, very personal. I'm looking very forward to the match at Wrestle Dream, and I just want to say that there was a moment where the crowd was saying no, no, please, no, with the potential retirement. And guys, it was a promise he made to his daughter. Like I think we should probably show a bit more tact. Like I know that we're just wrestling fans and we want to get as much of the guy as possible, but I think there is that little bit in the back of my mind that was like, well, you know what? He's earned the right to actually retire on his terms and however safely as possible.
And I think that the point that I think is that I don't think it's going to be like a clean, like a Shawn Michaels kind of retirement where it's like never again. Okay. I'm not counting Saudi Arabia. That doesn't count. I think it's going to be a bit more like a slow burn kind of retirement where, yes, he might come out for a special match, but he's just going to be no longer traveling on the road as he is now. So main event of the evening, it is the other semi-final in the Grand Slam tournament. I'm just going to preface this by saying I actually liked Roddy and Darby's match better, but this one was good as well. So Joe, he actually nopes the baseball slide, but Penta does hit a sling blade instead. The boys exchange chops, leaning against the ring post. Penta, he gets a table out, and Joe ends up dominating for a bit, but it's really nothing fancy. Penta hits three step-up enziguris, and still it won't keep Joe down. Joe hits snake eyes, a snapmare, and an elbow drop. Penta hits a crossbody, a backstabber. Joe responds with a scoop slam. Penta hits the Fuego super kick to the corner. Quick action going on here. Joe escapes Penta's patented armbar, hits an inverted atomic drop, a big boot, a running senton. Penta hits a high angle suicide dive, but when he tries to hit it a second time, Joe nopes it, and Penta finds the wooden table instead. We just get a random table spot here. Fabulous. He locks in the Kikina clutch. Of course, he's weakened. Penta's weakened here, so he does end up succumbing to the Kikina clutch by tapping out. Like I said, I don't think this one was quite as good as the other semi-final, and had what I believe is a needless table spot. But the upside is that it's Joe versus Roddy on a Wednesday night, just like OG NXT days. Take me back to my uni days.
Yeah, I think the match was solid. Not much else to add on it, to be honest. And we're going to see very shortly as we get into Dynamite the result of that match. But like you said, it was a bit of a reminder, and I think for some it would have brought them back to their ROH days for some older heads that watched that back in the day. Okay, before we move on to Dynamite, I just want to bring up this really interesting news item that I picked up on today, Thanasi. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but as we know, All In happened recently, and they made a very big deal about the fact that it was the highest paid attendance ever for a wrestling show.
Shoot.
And it was a shoot. It turns out that might not be the case. There's speculation, and I think there's still lots to go through with this, but the reports are saying from the official people in England that count the turnstile count at the stadium, they're reporting that instead of it being 81,000, like reported, that it's actually 72. And if that's the case, then AEW, which by the way, 72,000 is still a remarkable achievement, but now all of a sudden, what are we to believe when they announce their attendance as well?
That's a massive difference. It's not like I'm wondering what it is when it comes to measurement. Does it mean that like maybe 9,000 people bought a ticket and didn't show up? That doesn't seem quite plausible to me. But yeah, that is an interesting figure. I'd like to understand, as someone who studies econometrics, what the measurement error is here, and if indeed it's just some kind of shoot versus work. But I didn't see that piece of news, so that's interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt the same way you did, because in one of the reports I was reading, they were suggesting that there seems to be, on average, a 10% reduction in the turnout compared to tickets sold. And
Is that
that
so?
well, that's what they're saying in the company's history is that there is a trend in that
Okay.
direction. But I kind of feel the same way you do in the sense that like I can understand maybe for a Dynamite episode recording if that happens to be the case, but for All In, like surely you would have bought a ticket and actually gone. But I
Okay.
mean, I don't know, but I just found it interesting. Look, the thing is, uh, like I was saying, these are all just reports. Like we don't have an actual um exact number that we can be assured of, but I just thought it was something interesting. And in the day and age where we sort of vilify WWE for their false reporting, it's interesting to see if any of that's been happening in the other promotions, or if this is just a case of mistakes made, or they just weren't exact figures. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting news item. Okay, well, on that note, let's now move on to this week's Dynamite. The show started much as Collision did, with Jon Moxley, this time the hometown hero in Cincinnati, Ohio, uh, facing Big Bill for the AEW International Championship, and he managed to retain via submission, which I found quite interesting. He had him in a almost, I think, a triangle choke, really, and managed to tap him out, which was fair play to Jon Moxley. This was followed up by Don Callis and Konosuke Takeshita coming to the ring and unveiling their next target via painting. And this time, and I have to be honest, I got major Green Goblin Spider-Man vibes from this. They've attacked his body, and now they're attacking Kenny Omega's heart by going after Kota Ibushi. So I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup there. Following that, we had Toni Storm versus Hikaru Shida versus Nyla Rose versus Dr. Britt Baker in a four-way #1 contenders match to face Saraya at Grand Slam next week for the AEW Women's Championship. And Toni Storm managed to sneak away with the win after rolling up Dr. Britt Baker. So the Outcasts' civil war is well and truly on its way.
I want to see Toni Storm lose by disqualification when she uses not a chair shot. I want her to throw a shoe at Saraya or to the referee and get DQ'd for that. So she could yell out, "Watch for the shoe." I'd love to see that.
We'll see how that plays out next week. Next up, Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara had a promo segment, which was very heartfelt at first, with the two trading their stories of one another and how much love and adoration they have. And then it turned very intense about how they each need to win in the match that is going to take place next week between the two competitors, the first time in AEW for those two to face off in a singles match. And honestly, are you excited for this match? Do you think that it built up for it properly?
Look, I think this promo represented the build for it, and it was a nice promo. I would say it was nice. I wouldn't describe it as an emotional roller coaster. I would say it was an emotional yo-yo. It wasn't quite as intense. But look, as far as direction, this needs to result in a boost for Sammy Guevara, right? I don't think there's any two ways about it. Like he's been a little bit, I guess, stumbling in the wastelands of the mid card for far too long. This needs to be used to boost him. We know that he can go. Potentially might lead to something bigger later on, but some kind of a really good match needs to be pulled off here from these guys.
Following that, we had a video played out on Titantron from last week with MJF with Renee Paquette. And in this video, MJF pulled out some good old Steiner mathematics to prove that the odds are well and truly in his favor should he have to face Samoa Joe at Grand Slam. And that's it, even coming from a cutting linguist like MJF, I still have no idea what the hell they're talking about with this Steiner mathematics.
Could I just say, this was all taken in one take, right? Because the cameraman just recorded the whole thing all the way through. That piece of the promo was recited right at the end. Now, I don't know if you had cue cards, right? I'm assuming not, but nevertheless, to recite that kind of maths, it's an art form in and of itself. And let me tell you, at time of recording, I finished my econometrics exam less than an hour ago. I can't do that kind of maths, and I'm doing a master's level stats course. So props to the man MJF.
Next up, we had Adam Page versus Brian Cage. This is the third bout between the two competitors in the since they've both been in AEW. And Hangman managed to get the win with Deadeye. But post-match, he got attacked again by Brian Cage, and Swerve Strickland, who was out on the ramp, suggested Wrestle Dream as the perfect time and place for him and Page to meet in the ring. And that got later confirmed, so we've got a second match confirmed for Wrestle Dream in a couple weeks' time. Following that, Darby Allin and Nick Wayne had a tag team match against Daddy Magic and Coolhand Ange, with Darby and Nick Wayne emerging victorious. Post-match, Christian Cage issued the challenge for Darby and Sting to face him and Luchasaurus at Grand Slam. And then this brings us to the main event, which was Samoa Joe versus Roderick Strong in the World Title Eliminator Final. And honestly, in this match, I wasn't taking notes as much as observations. And the first observation I made is, God, Joe is just great, isn't he?
You know, I love the guy.
It was something that, as I was watching this, I honestly felt like he's one of the supreme talents in AEW right now, and that I think he's obviously getting a light shone on him at this time as probably the number one heel of the company. But I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there are other guys that are athletic. There are other guys that do all these spots and they get traction that way. But I was looking at him, I was just thinking, he is just a dominant force in every way necessary for a good level monster like heel. And he just does it, and it seems effortless the way he wrestles, the way he talks, the way he carries himself. Like, this is a veteran in every aspect of wrestling that has just honed his craft and knows exactly what's up.
Can I just express, obviously, as a fan of Joe, how lucky we are in the year 2023, because he was close to retirement because WWE didn't want to put him active. Around the time, actually, of the pandemic, it was around that time that he was first released. Then he was brought back. He won the NXT title for a third time and then very quickly released. And I was scared that that was going to be the end. So it's an absolute joy to have him and have it like a super long Ring of Honor TV title reign as well.
Okay, well, aside from the observations I was making, I did make a note of how the match actually finished. And it was a very solid main event, I felt, to end not just the tournament, but to set up for next week's title match against MJF. And Samoa Joe managed to actually get Roderick Strong to tap out to his chokehold. So Samoa Joe advances through. He's going to meet MJF next week. Post-match, he takes the microphone and announces that he's going to take everything from MJF. Now, at this point, he emphasized everything. We all assumed that means the title, his beloved title. But then, after some moments of Adam Cole coming out to check up on Roderick Strong, who had to be stretchered out, although obviously it seemed a bit like he was playing possum.
And what I loved was when Roddy was on the stretcher yelling out, Adam, Adam, I can't see you. It's like, come closer. Like, I need, not only I need you next to me, I need to be able to see you as I'm in pain. I thought that was amazing. It was like kind of like a yaya guilt trip, right?
For those who don't understand, yaya is another word for grandmother. So yes, a grandmother guilt trip.
Yeah.
We've unfortunately been victim to that many times.
That's right.
But we love our grandmothers. If you're out there listening, shout out.
Wait, did you just say if yayas out, if our yayas are listening?
You never know. They can be wrestling fans too.
All right.
But to get back on track, after that ordeal happens, Adam Cole is at the ramp, seemingly distressed with how it's playing out, and Samoa Joe comes running back out and chokes out Adam Cole, and then emphasizes again, I'm going to take everything from you, Max. So now it seems like he's not just targeting the title, he's targeting his brochacho for life. So we'll see how this plays out next week, but a very interesting episode of Dynamite to lead into next week's special Grand Slam. Any thoughts on Dynamite as a whole this week, Thanasi?
Look, as a whole, I thought it was a good way to build up to Grand Slam. Because I mean, it's not a pay-per-view; it's just an important Dynamite episode, and I think essentially all the segments had something relevant to build towards. So, in all, I think it was an appropriately presented episode.
Okay, well, let's now move on to WWE. And to start off with, Thanasi, take us through this week's SmackDown.
Yes, I will take us through this week's SmackDown. I will just get my notes up. So our opening contest was Charlotte and Shotzi Blackheart taking on Bayley and Io Sky of Damage Control. In this match, Io hits an Asai moonsault onto the outside. The heels isolate Shotzi, but she does get the hot tag, and Charlotte delivers a crossbody to both opponents and a fallaway slam, her cartwheel clothesline, and gets the figure four in as well. Io hits a Frankensteiner, and Bayley looks for a top rope action as well, but is distracted by Asuka sneaking up on Dakota Kai on the outside. Charlotte knocks Bayley off the top rope. Shotzi hits her modified DDT to get the pinfall. Look at that. Charlotte not stealing focus for once. Asuka and Io then go face to face to declare their intentions for the title shot. Backstage, Io says she is ready for Asuka. We then get a small segment backstage with Jimmy declaring that he's in, referring to the bloodline. Paul has some very interesting makeup, I think. It's like so clear that his face is made up because his neck and his hands are very clearly pale. But he says that Jimmy can settle AJ Styles tonight because there's in and then there's in, and he's not in the bloodline just yet. But Paulie's going to settle that. And then Paulie actually runs into AJ, and Jimmy knocks AJ's lights out. Back in the ring, LA Knight cuts a promo, and he references the Kevin Nash look at the adjective promo from the Attitude Era, and thank Christ he corrects it. He says, if I were a dummy, I'd say look at the adjective, but he doesn't. He points it out that it's incorrect. He says that he never needed John Cena's help or endorsement. And just as he's about to accept Miz's challenge, Grayson Waller emerges with Austin Theory. Theory talks himself up, to which Grayson responds with, yes, but LA Knight shows him how it's done with his quick quips as well. In the match, LA Knight versus Austin Theory, Knight has a nice swinging neck breaker, but Theory takes control in the corner with a vertical suplex. Knight uses some springboard action as well. Theory hits a neck breaker by draping Knight off the apron and then brings him down to the outside area. I like that top spot in particular. And then back in the ring, Knight gets a corner hip toss, but Theory responds with a rolling blockbuster. Knight hits a baseball slide to the outside, but Theory wins the power struggle to respond with a suplex. As we approach the finish of the match, Waller exposes the turnbuckle, but the ref's back is turned, so Knight reverses the Irish whip, power slam, people's elbow, he hits BFT and overcomes the odds to win the match. Briefly backstage, Paulie Heyman interacts with LA Knight. Perhaps they're teasing a little something down the track. Dimitri, did you have any comments on LA Knight, or shall I continue on with this one?
The same as I've felt for a long time, just immensely entertaining. I'm glad to see him get the win over Austin Theory and build up some momentum for the guy. And with Paul Heyman, I didn't feel it was so much a thing down the line of him and potentially Roman facing up.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was more in the line of we're using Paul Heyman to give this guy the rub and make him seem relevant. And I think on this episode of SmackDown in particular, like you'll get into it, I'm sure, it felt very much like we're now going to put some focus on the other guys around this camp and not just Roman and the Bloodline. Like it feels like they're now trying to share the wealth.
The next match on the card is our brand new undisputed tag team champions Judgment Day taking on Brawling Brutes, Butch and Ridge Holland. At the beginning, though, they cut one of their typical gloating promos. Dom even tries to speak over the crowd, but it's actually so difficult for him to do so, like, because they are actually booing him while he tries to talk over them, in spite of the fact, mind you, this guy has a microphone in the arena. So I was so impressed with that. The Brawling Brutes, of course, interrupt them, and Pete Dunne, or Butch, he uses digit manipulation to begin the attack. During the match, the babyfaces take early control. Ridge spins around in the face lock and then hits a delayed butterfly suplex. He even gets both opponents up for a backdrop. The heels then seize control, with Finn hitting a Booker T style scissor kick. Butch replies with a Shining Wizard and a moonsault to the outside, as Senor Money in the Bank hits a forward facelock face buster on Butch, and Balor gets the Sling Blade, two-legged dropkick, misses the coup de grace, and Butch actually hits the Enziguri on both Finn and Priest. But as we head to the end of the match, Priest does end up hitting the choke slam, the South of Heaven, on both opponents to set up coup de grace for the win. And right at the end of the match, Lashley and the Street Profits emerge to declare their intentions. So Judgment Day apparently isn't filling the void as the #1 faction. It's going to be them. So maybe some brand warfare or some factional warfare coming up. I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out, given all the tag team stuff happening on the Raw side. So I think I'm going to enjoy that kind of thing. Hopefully it's going to be good. Our main event of the evening is Jimmy Uso taking on the veteran AJ Styles, your boy, Dimitri. Uso looks to end it early with some roll-ups, but he can't escape the suplex backbreaker or the Enziguri. Jimmy does try to fight back with a stiff European uppercut. AJ Styles mistimes his outside attack, leading to a Jimmy super kick as Solo and Heyman appear on the stage. Uso smacks the Umaga-like hip smash in the corner as AJ rallies with a back suplex, and they exchange strikes and kicks. AJ, with a springboard forearm to the outside, follows it up with a fireman's carry neck breaker and a flowing DDT. AJ hits the phenomenal forearm to emerge victorious in this match. And the Judgment Day actually make the attack and roll him back in to eat Solo's spike. So perhaps they were offering it as a peace offering, but once again, it adds to this idea of some mixed factional warfare on SmackDown. Dimitri, your thoughts?
I love factions. I love seeing them go to war. So for me, this was excellent stuff. Particularly the face-off between Bobby Lashley, the Street Profits, and the Judgment Day got me very, very interested. And then seeing this add-on with AJ Styles being thrown in, who, by the way, is in his own faction.
Yes.
So there's a lot going on, and we saw that there was tension there on the night between AJ Styles and the Good Brothers. So obviously it's not as harmonious of a ship as everything else.
And I'll make this particular point. This is actually a fantastic part to show the evolution of where wrestling is, because very neatly, we've got the mummy Rhea Ripley on the Judgment Day side. We've got Michin Mia Yim as part of the club, the Good Brothers, and that lot. We also have a slot for Bianca Belair potentially to return as part of this new Bobby Lashley and Street Profits angle. So we can actually have a women's dimension in addition to the whole mid-card or world title scene and the tag team scene. So this is going to be fascinating if they really pull it off properly.
I'll be honest, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, you are right. Like, there is the potential. I don't know if they're going to push Michin that way. I personally quite enjoy her work, and I would be intrigued with her actually getting a bit more of an opportunity. Bianca Belair, if she were to join, we know she's a star. Like, definitely they would treat her as such. But I mean, that would be an interesting aspect if they could add to it. It's like, it seems like probably the one missing thing from any of these brand warfare type things that have happened in the past, really, is the idea of the women being able to combat it for each of the sides as well. Overall, I found SmackDown was an entertaining show. I wouldn't say it was especially better than previous episodes, but this one did stand out to me. Like, it did feel a bit more interesting for that reason, that they made everyone else feel like relevant players in the show and not just placeholders for Roman Reigns to show up and have his spot. Before we get into Raw, Thanasi, there was some big news from this week, and it was the confirmation of the deal with Endeavor, and WWE is now no longer in the hold of the McMahon family. This is big news. They've now combined with, I believe, UFC in a merger, and it's going under a brand name called TKO. But this is the conclusion of the deal that was first announced WrestleMania time earlier this year. How do you feel about this merger, Thanasi?
Look, my thoughts are in and of itself, the owner of a professional wrestling promotion does not really affect me as a viewer, right? It does affect the way that I view corporations, or it affects the way that I view a company professionally. But as a viewer, which is what I do in my personal capacity, it doesn't really come into it too much, as long as the owner doesn't affect creative. And for decades on end, the owner affected creative at the number one wrestling promotion on earth, and that was Vince McMahon. I think we've seen an alternative where, say, someone like a Ted Turner with WCW, he was not sitting in Gorilla following the wrestling week after week. Tony Khan at All Elite Wrestling does do that. He's very much ingrained. Jeff Jarrett, as when he began TNA and with Global Force Wrestling as well, he was very involved. And I bring up Global Force Wrestling because they introduced kind of like a new, they had a UFC world title belt, they had a WWE world title belt at the stock exchange when they opened up. So they introduced a new TKO world title belt, which looked like the old GFW belt circa 2017, 18, I want to say, whenever Del Rio was holding it. And where I'm going with this is I don't envision anyone from the other side of the divide being very strongly involved in the WWE half of this new company, right? Week after week. I do see Vince and Triple H still being the very strong flag bearers of the creative direction. And I don't see that changing at all, at least in the near term. So perhaps some presentation might change slowly, maybe some branding things, like we might have like a TKO signature at the beginning of the show before a WWE signature. These are like small things that I see changing, but I don't think we're going to have like a massive shock on the next episode of Raw, or the next episode of SmackDown. What do you reckon?
I think for the most part, I agree with what you're saying, and that the creative element will probably follow the trajectory that it has had. I have a question in my own mind of, will Vince McMahon seize even more control now and sort of just take it back and sort of turn it into his show once more and his type of wrestling, which I think would be a shame. The main concern I have is actually from some points that I heard raised firstly at the time the merger was announced, and that is there is some concern that Endeavor, which has a history of putting its pay-per-view events at an extortionate price. And I think that's the thing I'm concerned about with the merger, is because WWE does put on these premium live events fairly frequently on the monthly, and I just worry that if they're putting that at at buy rates of say $60 and up, obviously relative to whatever currency is around the world, but if they're going that high up, like that is going to deter a lot of fans, I think, and it's gonna really make it seem way too much about the finance, and it kind of makes it seem as if the Endeavor is trying to milk as much money out of it, which obviously they're gonna try to do, but I feel like there's still a way in which you can still respect your audience.
I think it's a really good point that you bring up, because the presentation model of UFC is more similar, say, to boxing, whereas WWE and professional wrestling, the model is a lot more like your traditional television show, because they have that weekly element. The pay-per-views are something of they're a local culmination. They used to be 4 times a year. Now we get them more frequently than that. But the model is very different. So I agree with you that it doesn't really make sense when you're offering weekly programming and 12 of these events every year, say on a monthly basis, to crack out $60 for each of them, it's an expense. Like it's a massive, massive bill. Whereas with the UFC and the boxing style, with that one, there's a lot more of a culture of like you go to a pub, I understand, or you go to a venue to watch it with people live if you can't make it to the event. Whereas pro wrestling, which, the boom of pro wrestling really began when it went on TVs. So the weekly television, the weekly product should be the focus there.
I think only time will tell really for us to know exactly what kind of changes are going to be brought as a result of the merger finally being completed. But on that note, let's just move on and talk about this week's Raw. So a quick rundown of what happened, and for any segments that I found particularly interesting, I'll add a bit more information and we can have a bit of a discussion about it as well, Thanassia. So the show started with Jey Uso and Kevin Owens having a bit of a confrontation in the ring, with Kevin Owens essentially saying he doesn't really trust him just yet. And they were interrupted by the Judgment Day because, of course, and they set up a tag match between the Judgment Day in the form of Damian Priest and Finn Balor and the team of Jey Uso and Kevin Owens. And the Judgment Day actually managed to come out on top in this one after Jey Uso accidentally superkicked Kevin Owens, leaving him vulnerable for Finn to deliver a coup de grace for the win. After that, we had The Miz beat Akira Tozawa after hitting 3 consecutive skull-crushing finales, and this was vengeance for The Miz after losing to Akira Tozawa 3 weeks prior. And then following that, we had an in-ring championship ceremony for Gunther to celebrate him breaking the record as longest reigning Intercontinental champion. For me, I found this segment and this portion of the episode very engaging. Chad Gable actually came out, and I loved this version of Chad Gable. He wasn't doing the shushes, he wasn't being a goof, just doing the silly things that have gotten him a lot of popularity of late, but he was serious and determined. And he said that he beat him, but I reckon I can, and I know I can beat you, Gunther, for the title. Gunther actually questioned him wanting to bring his family back out again just to see him lose. And he suggested that this was actually like bad behavior on his part. He said that it's the behavior of a disgusting, terrible father, which I thought was such a cutting line. And it was delivered with such force and conviction that I just thought, oh, this isn't trash talk for Gunther. This is him stating a fact. And that obviously led to Chad Gable getting incensed. Imperium and Gable brawled. Otis tried to make the save, but the numbers game took advantage. Though it was this point that Tommaso Ciampa ran out with a steel chair to make the save, and this set up a 6-man tag match later on. Drew McIntyre beat Xavier Woods. It was a really solid singles bout, I felt, especially for Xavier Woods. And it feels like they're sort of going away a bit for the time being of the makeshift team of Drew McIntyre and Matt Riddle. Obviously, Matt Riddle had his own issues this week. There was allegedly being sexually harassed and assaulted by a police officer at an airport. Obviously, we don't know the full story on that. It's still working its way, but
it's being investigated by the New York police.
Personally, in this particular context, I think it's a blessing in disguise because Drew McIntyre should be wasted in a makeshift tag scene, in my opinion. He should be going for higher honors. Cody Rhodes then comes out for a promo segment, and he literally only gets the words out he wants to talk about Jay before he gets interrupted by Dominic Mysterio and JD McDonough. And this leads to a brawl between the wrestlers with Cody Rhodes coming out on top, but the thing that we were all waiting for is to hear what he has to say. It seems like that's been delayed for another week. I think, Thanassia, this is teasing that Cody Rhodes has made himself the trade for Jey Uso and that he's going to SmackDown. What do you think?
Oh, I can see that happening. I genuinely can see that happening. I don't mind if it's going to be slow burn, but I just feel like on this particular segment, aside from the fact that once again they were so loud in booing Dom, we didn't really get to hear anything. Like we just got a Cody pop, sang along with this theme music, and that was basically it.
We'll see where that develops in the coming weeks. But after that, we had Shayna Baszler get a pinfall victory over Chelsea Green, with Piper Niven fighting Baszler post-match. And at this point, Zoe Stark actually ran out, got involved to even the odds. And this is seemingly continuing the build to what appears to be an alliance between Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler. Following that, Shinsuke Nakamura had a pre-recorded video further taunting Seth Rollins about his history and finishing up by saying he will face Rollins again when he feels like it. Very heelish antics there. And this was followed up by Seth Rollins' promo segment where he challenged Nakamura again to a fight right there and then. Nakamura's music played, but he didn't come out. Instead, what we saw was on the Titantron, and Shinsuke was backstage beating up Ricochet. And he reiterated his sentiment of, no, I will face you when I am ready. So it seems like they're waiting to build up until the next pay-per-view for the rematch. Following that, we had Alpha Academy and Tommaso Ciampa versus Imperium. And Alpha Academy and Tommaso Ciampa actually got the win in this match, with Chad Gable actually making Giovanni Vinci tap out with the ankle lock right when Tommaso Ciampa actually had a Brazilian stretch hold, I believe is what they called it, on Gunther to actually prevent him from breaking that submission hold. So that was a very interesting finish there.
I wonder if he calls it a Sicilian stretch, actually.
I think that might be like what he calls it, yeah. Needless to say, it was an interesting way to wrap up that match. And personally, I would actually be interested in seeing Tommaso Ciampa have a crack at the IC Championship as well. But I don't know if that's where they're going with this or what's going on. And then we had our main event of the evening, which was Rhea Ripley versus Raquel Rodriguez for the Women's World Championship. So just some things to highlight here. It seems like in this match, Rhea Ripley sort of forewent the attitude of, I'm going to outpower Raquel Rodriguez. Instead, she was trying to use other aspects of her offense, which included aerial maneuvers, such as hitting a missile drop kick and launching herself into a somersault off the steel steps onto Raquel Rodriguez. At one point, she even hit a frog splash, obviously a trick that she's picked up from Dirty Dom. And then she tried to cannonball onto Rodriguez on the outside, but Rodriguez actually caught the champ and swung her into the announce table, which reminded me of when Joe did that same spot on Punk at All In. And then at this point, out of nowhere, and I was watching this match, and not one fiber of my being said this was going to happen. Nia Jax just emerged and beat up Raquel Rodriguez, and this allowed Rhea Ripley to get the advantage, hitting Riptide for the win. Nia Jax is back. She then faces off with Rhea Ripley in the ring, and then she beats up Rhea Ripley. And it seems like she's targeting her title, but that's it. I'm just curious, are you happy to have Nia Jax back? Like, I'll be honest, I would have been fine going the rest of my life without seeing her back in the ring. But I'm not like so against it that I'm angry she's back. But this really felt out of nowhere, didn't it?
Look, I mean, from my side, I don't have a vendetta against Nia Jax. But all I can ask is, like, who the hell asked for her to come back? Like, who was banging on the door as an involved consumer saying, this is what I want on my television screen, right? Like, we're all talking about, Nick Khan being asked about CM Punk at the press conference. CM Punk is who we want to see on our screens. We don't want to see Nia Jax. It screams of a Vince decision on the last Raw of his full control or his full ownership of the company. That's all I can reflect on.
I think for me, the takeaway I got from this is that they want Nia Jax as a transitional contender for Rhea Ripley, as just a big body for her to actually overcome. Because obviously with Ripley, she dominates the majority of the women's division. With Raquel Rodriguez, they had a peer. And I think with Nia Jax, they're going for that same vibe of someone who's actually who can outpower her and give her a big scalp in her title reign.
Interestingly, I'm personally reminded, because I made my notes that there's going to be like a heel versus heel, and it's like, well, Rhea's not a babyface. She's going to be a makeshift babyface for the purposes of this feud, just like she was against Charlotte when she won the Royal Rumble and took her on at WrestleMania. So I think that's just an interesting parallel that I came up here. I don't think they've gone so far as to analyze it that much, but just something that I picked up on.
Well, that wraps up the WWE programming from this week. This week, we've actually got a special for all our audio listeners. So, Thanasi, let's now go into a quiz. Now,
Let's do it.
with Gunther doing so well as IC champion, I thought it only fitting that we reflect on the history of the Intercontinental Championship. So I've got 10 questions here, and to start off with, very simple for any wrestling fan that is in the know, who was the first ever Intercontinental Champion?
Well, hopefully many wrestling fans know this one, but this one would be Pat Patterson.
That is exactly correct. Pat Patterson was for many years a right-hand man of Vince McMahon as well, for anyone that wasn't aware.
Did you know that the story is that he won well, actually, I'm going to sound like an ass here, but apparently he won a fictional tournament to unify the North American or the North, like the United States belt and the South American belt, hence Intercontinental. It was a fictional tournament, though. He didn't actually win anything.
Yeah. Next up, second question. Who has the highest number of reigns as Intercontinental Champion? And for a bonus point, Thanasi, try name how many reigns this person has.
Oh, I actually know I think I know the answer to this one because of a promo that was not cut in WWE. It was cut in NJPW. I believe the answer is Chris Jericho, who declares himself a 9 times Intercontinental Champion of the WWE and a 1-time Intercontinental Champion in NJPW for 10 total IC reigns.
Exactly correct. Yes, Chris Jericho is the one with the most reigns with 9. Just notable mention, the person in second is actually The Miz, who has 8. So I thought that was interesting.
He has to overtake. By the end of his career, he needs 2 more and take the record.
We'll see. We'll see what happens there. I'm not sold because I think The Miz is in a good place. He might not want it. So who knows? All right, next question. Number 3. In what year was the Intercontinental Championship introduced?
Oh, that one's a hard one. I want to say in the 70s. You know what? Let's go right down the middle. Let's say 1975.
That is incorrect. The correct answer is 1979.
Oh, okay. I wasn't that far off, actually.
When you said the 70s, I thought, okay, he's on here, but yeah, no, 1979 was when Pat Patterson, as you said, won this fictitious tournament to unify the North American and South American championships, something like that. Next question. Who holds the record for most combined days as IC champion?
Oh, this one is a hard one. Logically, one would think it's either the long reigns like Gunther and Honky Tonk, or the aggregate of the ones with the most reigns like Jericho and The Miz. I think I'm actually going to go with The Miz on this one.
It's not a bad shout. I can understand the logic behind it, and I wouldn't have got this one without having known the answer. It's Pedro Morales.
Oh, Morales. Okay.
And his combined record, whether so it's 617 or 619 days as champion, depending on whether what WWE formally recognizes. Obviously, there were lots of delays back in the day, tape delays. So sometimes the records are a bit mixed. But yeah, it was Pedro Morales. Next question, bringing it a bit more contemporary. Obviously, Gunther is the current champion. Who did Gunther beat to become Intercontinental Champion?
That is a fantastic question. I want to say Ricochet.
Are you locking that in?
Yeah, let's lock in Ricochet. First instinct is typically right.
In this case, you got it right. Yes, it is Ricochet. And keeping on Gunther a little bit as a theme, obviously he broke, everyone knows now, he broke the Honky Tonk Man's record. But I want to ask a different question, which is, before Gunther, who held the record for longest reign of this millennium? So from 2000 onwards.
From 2000 onwards, okay. That's another very good question. I think we're talking the longest single reign, right?
Longest single reign, not a
Single
cumulative.
reign. Okay.
Single.
I'm thinking through who the potentially long reigns were, and people that come to mind are like Randy Orton 2004. Not a lot is coming to mind for 2005, 6, 7. Jeff Hardy got stripped of the belt. I don't know. I don't think he held it very long. The Miz potentially, Cody Rhodes potentially. I think he held it for a fair while. Maybe Wade Barrett as well. He had a few reigns. Maybe one of them was long. But it's a long millennium. I know Shinsuke actually held it for a long time as well because he didn't defend it. You know what? I'm going to go with Randy Orton.
Okay, then you're going with Randy Orton?
Yeah.
That is incorrect. Someone who was very close to that thing you mentioned was Cody Rhodes. He was very close. He was like 236 days or something along those lines. The longest IC champion of this millennium before Gunther was actually the gold standard Shelton Benjamin.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Hey.
he held it for 244 days. And notably, he won the title at Taboo Tuesday in 2004. And he did not know that was back when that sort of stipulation was very shoot. So they had to just go with whoever got the most votes. And in that time, they didn't know who was going to get voted, and they didn't actually think it was going to be Shelton Benjamin, as I'm sure you remember, Thanasi. But
yeah, they thought it would be Batista who would be voted as the number one, but Shelton Benjamin got the win.
And they decided to just give it to him. He beat Chris Jericho, and they had, by all accounts, a very decent match and big.
Oh, they had a very good match.
Next question. Who is the oldest person to have won the Intercontinental Championship? And for a bonus, how old were they? So obviously, in this case, we're saying at the time of winning it, who was the oldest, not who is the oldest person to have ever won it.
Okay.
Just in general.
Look, it is the workhorse belt. So typically, like, you put it on your young guys before you give them the world title shot. There are a few veterans that come to mind. This is a hard one, though. I'm thinking people like The Miz more recently, or Daniel Bryan 2015, or Razor just always looked old, but he won it in the 90s. So I don't think I'd put Razor Ramon. The Big Show. Let's go with the Big Show.
That is incorrect, I'm afraid. The correct answer we were looking for was Ric Flair.
Oh, yes.
And
can I guess how old he was?
Go ahead. Geo crack.
He won it in 2000 I think he won it in 2005, and he held it into 2006. And around that time, he would have been what? 54?
You're close. Very close. It was 56.
Okay.
But yeah, so Ric Flair. Who would have thought, huh? Okay, the next question, number 8. Who was the last person to win the Intercontinental Championship on a pay-per-view? And if you can, try and name the event in which it happened.
This probably speaks to the fact that the IC title and the US title have kind of become pseudo TV championships, because the title changes don't happen all that often on pay-per-view. I'm gonna guess that the pay-per-view was Payback, and I'm gonna guess that it was won by Shinsuke.
Okay. You were wrong on both of those, I'm afraid.
Oh, amazing. Go on, man.
It was actually Apollo Crews, and this was at WrestleMania 37, Night 2. He won in that Nigerian
Oh,
drum match or something
yes,
against Big E.
yes.
So yeah. So that was literally 2 main years ago, was the last
Yeah.
time the title changed hands on a pay-per-view. Hopefully
Wow.
with Gunter, we'll see someone lose it on a pay-per-view and not just on TV, just to give it that great flourish of a finish.
Yeah.
All right, the penultimate question, Thanasi. When was the last time the Intercontinental Championship main evented a pay-per-view?
I'm somewhat confident with this one. I think it was Extreme Rules in 2018. I think it was Dolph versus Seth Rollins in an Iron Man match.
That is exactly correct. Yes, the two had that Iron Man match, and I think that's, if you will recall, in that match, uh, they kind of felt like the timer was hijacking the actual competitors because everyone was
Yes.
cheering for the time, and they actually had to remove it from the Titantron to try to give focus to Dolph and Seth. And this leads nicely into our final question, which is, how many times has the Intercontinental Championship main evented a pay-per-view in WWE?
Okay, I'm not going to get the answer right to this one. However, I'm going to recite the ones that I know of. Obviously, there was the one that we just mentioned, Extreme Rules 2018. I also recall, I think it was Taboo Tuesday, maybe 2005 or 6 or something. And I think that was Ric Flair against Triple H in a steel cage. And I think they put them in the main event, I think. SummerSlam, of course, 1992 at Wembley. And let's go with just one miscellaneous that I can't remember, just margin of error. Let's say 4 times.
Just doing a double check, make sure I've got the right
Got a fact
records.
check here.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I've got it right. For close, it's actually 6.
Oh, okay.
And the thing I was checking just to make sure, because when you said Ric Flair, Triple H, I thought, oh crap, I think that actually might have been one. I didn't have it in my records, but no, that was the penultimate match of that card.
Oh, okay.
That was John Cena versus Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels was the main event of that night. So it's 6. As you correctly said, SummerSlam 1992, Extreme Rules 2018. The other ones were In Your House 3, and In Your House 8, which I'll be honest, I didn't know. Another one was Backlash 2001. And probably the most famous.
Was Backlash 2001 though? That I think it was a winner takes all.
Yes, and I'll get onto that in a
Okay.
second.
Yeah.
And then the other one, which is probably the most notable case that you missed, well, because many talk about SummerSlam 1992, and I think the other one they refer to is WrestleMania 6, which was the winner-take-all between Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan.
Okay.
And the thing I was going to bring up is that, so in terms of just the title itself being defended on its own, I believe it's only happened on 3 occasions, and that was on In Your House 8, SummerSlam 1992, and Extreme Rules 2018. At In Your House 3 and Backlash 2001, it was a winner-takes-all, not just for the IC in the world, but also for the tag team titles.
Mm-hmm.
And at WrestleMania 6, as we mentioned, it was the winner-takes-all, the big event for both the IC and the WWE Championship. So that wraps up the quiz for this week, Nancy. How did you find that? I'll give you a sec. I'll tell you in a sec what your result was, but how did you find
Yeah,
that?
no, there was some bloody hard ones in there. All these like weird random facts about the numbers of how many days and who has the longest reigns, and specifically when it made evented pay-per-views. That was, look, well constructed. Good on you for putting that together. But there were some hard ones in there. I'm glad I managed to pick up, especially the late ones, like the couple of the main events. The fact that I picked up on those. But yeah, my assumption was that Triple H is going to just put himself in the main event if it's got to be for a mid-card title. That's why my mind jumped to that steel cage Taboo Tuesday match.
Okay, well, you got 5 points out of a possible 13.
Oh, that's not so good.
No, but you know what? I think you did all right, because I'll be honest, I wanted this one to be a quiz in which we could actually learn something from it, not just get the questions right. So I deliberately tried to tailor it so we hear things that we didn't know. Like, for example, I before researching it, I didn't know how many times it had main evented a pay-per-view, and I was curious.
Yeah.
So isn't that what it's all about? It's all about learning and broadening our knowledge.
Yes, it's all about the learning.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Audible Finish. Thanasi, it was great to have your company as always.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.